Thank you for viewing our webinar today. My name is Kristen Brennan. I'm a Prevention Coordination Specialist with Fairfax County Government's Neighborhood and Community Services Prevention System. We're excited to share with you what we think is very important information that will help you provide the most effective services possible to your clients, participants, students, etc. We know that a large number of Fairfax County residents accessing human services have been exposed to trauma, and we also know that this may have an impact on their functioning and on how they interact with others. The concept of universal precautions makes a lot of sense here. Just like you assume that everyone you treat with your first aid skills has a blood-borne pathogen, you can assume that all of the children and youth that you're serving have some type of trauma history. You don't have to investigate and figure out the facts about what the children and youth that you're working with might have been exposed to in order to implement strategies that can be helpful to everyone. There's a lot of national and local focus on creating trauma-informed human services systems. For a system to be truly trauma-informed, staff at all levels need to understand what trauma is and also need to be able to recognize the signs that someone might be struggling. One of the primary goals of this training is to create a common language among all of our youth-serving staff across the county when it comes to trauma awareness. We hope that everyone who attends this training will feel well equipped to operate within the scope of their job duties with a trauma lens in place. We're going to go into much more detail about what this means as we go through the training, but we want to kick this off by highlighting that you, in your position, have a unique opportunity to build relationships with children and youth and respond to them in a way that helps them build resiliency and manage the impact of trauma. To obtain the positive outcomes that we all want for our children and youth, it's important for everyone to play their role in providing support and connecting children and youth to available services and resources. Before we begin, I do want to mention that this topic may be hard for some of us to hear about or to discuss. Given the national prevalence rates of trauma, many of you viewing this presentation may have experienced some form of trauma directly or know someone who has. Sometimes when people first learn about the effects of trauma, it can be unsettling as you learn how it may have affected you. The great news is that healing is possible, and you can each play a role in helping children and youth recover from these experiences. With that in mind, it's okay to press pause, go get some water, stretch your legs, or whatever you need to do to take care of yourself and process this presentation. So what exactly is trauma? In today's common vernacular, people seem to throw around the term PTSD to describe all exposure to trauma. PTSD is actually a mental health diagnosis that requires a mental health professional or clinician to check off several different areas or components of distress. Not everyone who experiences trauma, even severe trauma, will develop post-traumatic stress disorder. In fact, only about 7% of people exposed to horrible incidents develop PTSD. For our purposes, when we talk about trauma, we're not necessarily talking about PTSD. We're talking about any experience that causes an intense stress reaction with ongoing effects. For many people, trauma can stem not only from one experience, but from multiple events or even a set of circumstances. A group of people could share a common experience, but based on many variables like health status, prior experiences, individual resiliency, etc., some of them may find that experience to be traumatic while others may not. It really comes down to how the individual experiences the event. When people experience an event as traumatic, it can have lasting effects on various components of their well-being. Before we get into that a little more, let's talk about what types of experiences might be considered traumatic. We now know that children who witness violence are often suffering stronger effects than those who are the direct victims of violence. We know that many Fairfax County residents have immigration experiences that may have been traumatic, and many have been exposed to trauma in their home countries as a result of war or terrorism. Events like Hurricane Katrina and 9/11 are examples of things that have happened right here in the U.S. that led to trauma for many people. Here we look at trauma happening in three different spheres. Folks may have one traumatic experience, like a car accident, that's really isolated to a single acute incident. Complex trauma occurs when folks have multiple exposures to traumatic events, things like ongoing child abuse and neglect, or experiencing or witnessing domestic violence usually fall into this category. Systemic and historical trauma refer to things like racism, poverty, and discrimination that may be themes across the lives of the children and families that you're working with. These issues may permeate all of the systems that they interact with, and the historical, generational, and ongoing nature of these types of traumas can have a lot of influence on how folks view their environment and their world. To put it another way, the behaviors associated with trauma are normal reactions to horrific situations that endure even though the individual is not in immediate danger. These adaptations can cause challenges and conflict for the individual in their daily life. Let's talk about what these behaviors can look like. Trauma can impact the well-being of children and youth in a variety of ways. Triggers are things that remind us of an event. In the case of trauma, a trigger could be almost anything. Smells, sounds, or even a certain tone of voice might be a reminder of a traumatic experience. When children and youth become triggered, they're back in the moment of their trauma, and they may not be able to access the logical part of their brain to make appropriate decisions about how to respond to the situation. Everyone has probably heard of the brain's fight, flight, or freeze response. Our brains go into fight, flight, or freeze when we experience a trauma and can do the same thing when we become triggered. Children and youth need help building skills to respond more appropriately to triggering events. A trigger could be anything, sound, smell, touch, etc., that reminds them of the trauma or something that they associate with it. Triggers may be unpredictable and difficult to anticipate for both the traumatized individual and those working with them. Consider unexpected and seemingly extreme reactions to be possible responses to trauma triggers. Now, we won't get too deeply into the technical aspects of this, but for those who are interested, this is just a little bit of a primer on sort of the biological basis of what happens with the brain when someone experiences trauma. The brain develops from the bottom up and from the inside out. Trauma comes in through our 5 senses: sight, touch, sounds, smells, tastes, and these senses tend to be our triggers later. It's good to help identify triggers early on and to remind ourselves when they're happening that this is only a memory of the trauma. The trauma is not actually happening again. The thinking part of our brain, the neocortex, shuts down. The reactive parts of our brain engage: fight, flight, or freeze. Lots of hormones are rushing through the body that shut down our memory and cognitive functions. Behavior may appear irrational, playing dead and not fighting back, or vice versa, depending on the situation and person. Animals simply rest and digest after a trauma, but humans are higher thinking. We need to go back and process what happened. We need to put the experience back into the thinking brain, neocortex, in order to start to make sense of it. The adolescent brain is not fully developed until the mid-20s, so trauma can make the deficits already present in the developing adolescent brain more pronounced. What can a traumatic experience do to the brain? If trauma is prolonged, extreme, or repetitive, it can physically change the brain. The amygdala, the bodyguard, can become stuck in an alert state. The body continues to sense danger when there is none and sends out stress response signals. The person who experienced the trauma keeps living in the moment. Long after the trauma ends, the person may become unable to separate now and safe from then and danger. A trauma-informed environment realizes the widespread impact of trauma and understands potential paths to recovery, recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients, families, staff, and others involved with the system, responds by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices, and seeks to actively avoid re-traumatization. A trauma-informed approach can be implemented in any type of service setting or organization. So what does it mean for human services staff to be trauma-informed? When someone experiences a traumatic event, there's almost always a feeling of powerlessness and a perceived loss of control. Factors that might be creating instability for children and youth, divorce, eviction, etc., might bring up some of those very same feelings. Consider how the barriers that clients might be experiencing related to accessing resources on their own might bring up those same feelings of powerlessness and lost control. Awareness includes creating warm, welcoming, and comfortable spaces, friendly, inviting, empathetic interactions, awareness of how traumatic stress symptoms may manifest themselves differently depending upon cultural factors, viewing behavioral challenges through a trauma lens. The behavior may make sense as a coping strategy or adaptation given what the person has experienced, and making procedures and routines sensible, consistent, and predictable to convey a sense of control and safety. So how can we acknowledge that trauma can have negative long-term effects on people while maintaining a practical, hopeful, and asset-focused approach? So this is one of the common tools that's used to help people understand the different types of adverse childhood experiences that can be traumatic and assess the level of trauma that an individual might have experienced. And these are further graphics that describe the effects of trauma on behavior, on physical and mental health, and then throughout the population, the effects that trauma can have, even ranging into earlier death for people who've experienced high trauma load. Obviously, for people who've experienced trauma, these messages of doom can be very distressing. So in a lot of our programming, we have the philosophy that all children are capable of success, no exceptions. And how does that jive with these messages of negative effects of trauma? You may believe or work for an organization that promotes the Kids at Hope philosophy, that all children are capable of success, no exceptions. I certainly do. But we also know that trauma may have stacked the deck, so to speak, against some of us. Our models tell us that these risks are real. How do these two ideas work together? Aren't they sort of contradictory? Okay, so what's the answer? It's true that traumatic experiences create challenges for the survivor, but they also create new neural pathways, a different perspective on life, and coping skills, which can be positive. Words are everything. The words we use for behaviors affect how we perceive the behaviors. We can reframe the negative behaviors of traumatized youth and adults, develop a growth mindset, and focus on assets for all youth, regardless of trauma history. So first, let's talk about growth mindset. According to Carol Dweck of Stanford University, in growth mindset, people believe that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are just the starting point. This view creates a love of learning and a resilience that is essential for great accomplishment. Virtually all great people have these qualities. This is an essential skill for people who've been through trauma. It's imperative that we're empowered to believe and build on our strengths. It's critical that we see our minds and abilities as flexible and capable of improving. When working with youth whose behavior is challenging, no matter the cause of that behavior, it can be helpful to check our assumptions and the labels we use with that youth. That sassy, strong-willed girl may just be a positive leader one day with the right guidance. More importantly, we can help traumatized youth recognize the tools and life skills they may have gained from their adverse childhood experiences, such as adaptability, creativity, empathy, resilience, resourcefulness, gratitude, and compassion. These skills can also be developed and strengthened with a growth mindset. So I hope at this point that you're on board with the idea that there's a lot more behind negative behavior than just defiance or a bad attitude. Before we talk about how to respond when challenging behavior comes up, let's talk a little bit about preventing it in the first place. All of the strategies and techniques that we'll talk about make sense for everyone, whether they have a trauma history or not. First, remember earlier when I spoke about creating a predictable, sensible routine. Offering choices gives us all a sense of control over our environment and puts us more at ease. Avoid unnecessary power struggles. Focus on problem solving. Remember, the goal is to give youth the tools to fix their own problems next time rather than rescuing them. This improves their sense of control in the future. Next, and I cannot stress this enough, try to maintain a neutral, calm tone of voice and body language. And I know this can be very difficult. People who have experienced or witnessed abuse can be very triggered by a harsh, angry tone of voice or even a light touch. Try to have a game plan for where youth can retreat when they're feeling escalated. And finally, if appropriate in your setting, learn some techniques for self-calming and teach them to youth. We have just a couple of self-calming or self-regulating tools that you might find useful and you might have the opportunity to share with youth. This is a 5-4-3-2-1 grounding exercise. If a youth is seeming stressed, irritable, or anxious, this is a technique that can help them reconnect with the physical world around them. Training yourself and youth to identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste is a way to ground yourself in the real world when you're feeling a little bit stressed out. Breathing is a critical tool for those of us who experience triggers, as the fight, flight, freeze response can cause shallow breathing that can make symptoms worse. Breathing techniques like the 4-7-8 breathing strategy can help to refocus the mind after a trigger. So now let's talk about when it's too late for prevention and you've got an escalated or acting out youth in front of you. When challenging behavior strikes, continue to be mindful of your own physical presence and tone of voice as part of managing the fact that you may be triggered by aggressive, disrespectful, or otherwise challenging behavior. Children and youth need you to remain calm. And I think for those of us in human services who've worked with children and teens a lot, there sometimes tend to be those teens that maybe just rub us the wrong way and we're reacting to their attitude. It's really important to identify when we have those reactions and try to remain calm and a neutral, respectful tone of voice. Think about what might actually be happening to trigger the behavior. Ask the child or youth very simple questions about what's going on in a compassionate manner. Try offering food or water, or suggest some basic relaxation techniques like deep breathing to help bring them back to the moment. And here's a link for some other ideas. Help the child or youth regain control by validating their thoughts and feelings and offering them choices for how they can remove themselves from the situation or otherwise manage the unacceptable behavior. Calmly request that they choose from one of several workable options. Use active and reflective listening. Don't interrupt. Avoid judgment and offer advice and reassurance sparingly. Focus on providing choices so that children and youth can feel empowered to help themselves. Remember that their behavior is not driven by logic. They're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, and survival responses may be taking over. Try some de-escalation techniques to help them manage their aggression and calm down. Check out this video to see how to pull some of these ideas together. Consider what fight, flight, or freeze may actually look like in your setting, and avoid interpreting the behavior in a negative way. For example, a triggered individual might run away expectedly, become irritable, hostile, or aggressive, or shut down, not speaking, making eye contact, or participating. So what if someone discloses a traumatic experience? Never force someone to talk about their trauma, but you can provide a safe and non-judgmental space for them to disclose if they choose. That being said, it's important to remember your role. You do not need to ask for details or investigate what happened. Many children and youth who experience trauma will need professional therapeutic supports, and we want to make sure that we're not creating situations where kids have to tell their stories over and over again, particularly to people who are not in a position to offer them the level of service that they may need. Our response to disclosure, when a child or teen discloses something that's happened to them, needs to be one of empathy, compassion, and non-judgment. We need to let the child or youth know that we believe them and that we support them. Now that you know more about the different ways that trauma can come out in behavior, you can even normalize some of the struggles that the child or youth may be facing as a result of their trauma. Given what you know, you'll find that many of the behaviors and responses that you're seeing from the children and youth in your program make sense given what they've experienced. It's also important to remember your role as a mandated reporter. If you learn that a child in your program has been the victim of abuse or neglect, you're required to call the CPS hotline to report the incident. Remember, this does not mean that you have to investigate the incident yourself. If you're unsure of your role as a mandated reporter of child abuse, please follow up with your supervisor at your earliest convenience. Most agency and program policies require that you also let your supervisor know when a reportable situation has been brought to your attention. So what does it mean to focus on strengths? Think of a difficult or abrasive youth that you've worked with. How can you change your thinking about and ultimately your response to this youth by focusing on their strengths? Reframe their behavior so they don't push your buttons. Be aware of your own triggers and hot buttons and be prepared to manage them in your interactions by using a strengths-based approach. Know your role. If you're not sure about how to respond to a child's disclosure about his or her trauma, seek consultation from your supervisor. It's important that as professionals we're careful about our body language, facial expressions, and speech during these times. We do not want to be reactive, as that may influence the child and any future disclosure. So what that means is if a child tells you something that you're very upset by, try to remain calm and neutral so that you don't discourage them from sharing this information again in the future. Many children and youth who have experienced trauma can benefit from services above and beyond what might be offered in your setting. Familiarize yourself and your team with local resources and talk to your supervisor when you think it might be appropriate to connect a child or family to some outside resources or supports. As we mentioned earlier, know your agency and job responsibilities in terms of any mandated reporting requirements. Know your organization's process for making referrals and connecting clients to resources. And here are some things not to do. A trauma-informed approach means providing role-appropriate interventions for all children regardless of a known trauma history. Therefore, do not ask for details regarding traumatic past experiences. And if they do bring them up, see the intervention techniques section. Do not investigate. Don't assume the worst. And don't go it alone. Don't go beyond your role. Seek out resources and help. So isn't all of this too much work? When we have educational or program responsibilities, it can be overwhelming to keep all these concepts in mind. But with practice, they can truly make us more successful. Kids respond to adults who get them. You may be the only adult in the young person's life who treats them with respect. It's not more work, it is the work. So there are quite a few resources on trauma and the populations that we serve who've experienced trauma on the internet. We have a few links here, and you can certainly contact the prevention unit if you would like more information about anything that we've covered in this presentation. We also have a list here in the presentation of some local service providers. So if you are in Fairfax County, and some of these organizations serve Northern Virginia in general, these are the contacts for those organizations and for the school system. And there are also some national and regional hotlines that are available for people. I want to revisit what I talked about at the beginning, which is that this can be very stressful information for someone who is a trauma survivor. If this is the first time that you've experienced trauma training, you may need some time to think about and process how this information has impacted you as an individual in your own life. And if you find that you need help processing that, here are some different resources that are available throughout the community. So I want to thank you very much for the work that you are doing for our community's youth and the people that we serve, and the time that you've taken to view this presentation. And again, encourage you, if you have any questions, go back to the first slide. The contact information for the prevention unit is there. You can get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to further assist you. Thank you very much, and again, I'm Kristen Brennan with the Fairfax County Prevention Unit.